Hi Year 10, I hope you're all staying safe and you're keeping well. We're going to have a read of Extract 19 from Jekyll and Hyde today and complete tasks 28 and 29 alongside it, which are in your booklet. This starts at the bottom of page 49, going on to page, 41, going on to page 42 in the booklet, just so you know where to head to in a moment. It is task 28, first of all. So in your booklets, you have got this rather hideous image of Mr. Hyde. The first thing to do today is to look back over your reading and all your work so far. And you're aiming to surround the picture with 6 quotations that show Hyde as a terrifying outsider to the society that he's living in. So the quotes that you find could be describing his appearance or his behaviour. They might describe the way other characters react to him, or perhaps the horrendous crimes he has committed. You're looking for anything that shows him to be both terrifying and also obviously different to the other characters in the story. So anything that shows him as being unusual to the society that he lives in. So it might be worth just pausing this video here for a minute while you do that, and then you can come back to do the next task in a moment. Okay, well done Year 10. So with task 28 complete, let's move on and have a little look at task 29. So task 29 is the extract task. It's going to look at, ask us to have a little look at the first part of extract 19. And then we're going to have an answer of, or come up with some ideas for this question. What terrible discoveries do Utterson and Poole make when they break down the door? So let's have a read of the extract together. You can either follow along on the screen, I've popped it up on there, or in your pack if you have printed it out. Here we go. So extract 19. Right in the middle, there lay the body of a man sorely contorted and still twitching. They drew near on tiptoe, turned it on its back, and beheld the face of Edward Hyde. He was dressed in clothes far too large for him, clothes of the doctor's bigness. The cords of his face still moved with a semblance of life, but life was quite gone, and by the crushed phial in the hand and the strong smell of kernels that hung upon the air, Utterson knew that he was looking on the body of a self-destroyer. "We have come too late," he said sternly, "whether to save or punish. Hyde is gone to his account, and it only remains for us to find the body of your master." So here, Utterson, who's the lawyer, and Poole, Jekyll's butler, break into the laboratory, into Jekyll's laboratory, where they find Hyde wearing Jekyll's clothes and apparently having committed suicide. And there's instantly some quite important details that we could have a little look at. So the first description we have is right in the middle. There lay the body of a man sorely contorted and still twitching. So this is a grim description, isn't it? The fact that he's described as contorted suggests that he's sort of fallen in a really sort of painful way on the floor. If something's contorted, it just does suggest that it's uncomfortable, it's not in a usual position, that it's something quite grim has happened. And we've also got the fact that the body is still twitching. So it shows that this death has just happened. Hyde is dead, but it's so recent that the body is still convulsing from whatever has caused the death. And then Stevenson carries on to describe this. They drew near on tiptoe, turned it on its back, and beheld the face of Edward Hyde. So it's interesting that they drew near on tiptoe, because their initial reaction is that it is the body of a man, it is a dead person, but this body is lying so that they can't see the face. So they do approach on tiptoe, suggesting their sort of fear and their uncertainty. It's a complete unknown to them. They might sort of guess at who it is, but they don't know until they turn it on its back. And the use of the pronoun it and its there, rather than sort of saying he and acknowledging that this is a man, relates to the imagery that we've had throughout for Hyde, doesn't it? As a character who's inhuman, he's monstrous, animal-like, a bit like he's not sort of worthy of the human form of he there. It also, again, reiterates the fact that he is other to anyone else in Victorian society, that he is our outsider. And that very simple technique of just using the it and its rather than he serves to really emphasise the fear felt by Utterson and Poole, and by us readers as well, all together in sort of noticing what's going on here. So a fear that's shared. So following this bit, we have that he was dressed in clothes far too large for him, clothes of the doctor's bigness. So Poole and Utterson have instantly noticed that he is wearing Dr. Jekyll's clothes. And that instantly adds to their concern and the mystery surrounding where actually Dr. Jekyll is at this point. So here's Hyde lying dead on the floor of Dr. Jekyll's laboratory, wearing Dr. Jekyll's clothes, but with no sign of Dr. Jekyll himself. The green there tells us that life was quite gone. So they are confirming that Hyde is dead. But Utterson, sort of looking about him, notices some other bits. So he notices the crushed phial, which is the glass medical bottle, the strong smell of kernels. And putting these together, Utterson believes that Hyde has committed suicide. And this links in quite strongly with the theme of supernatural that runs throughout Jekyll and Hyde. We've got the past tense there, was, so life was quite gone, which is spooky, isn't it? Because there is a dead man in the laboratory with Utterson and Poole, and that is an unusual, a very kind of eerie, quite spooky setting that we now have. The crushed phial as well is also quite important. It's quite harrowing imagery. It shows addiction, the fact that it's still in his hand right to the end. And it can also, due to the fact that it is crushed, so it's crushed glass, serve as a bit of a metaphor for how science not only has the power to do a lot of good, but it also has the ability to destroy life. For Victorian readers, we also have in that green part the quote, Utterson knew that he was looking on the body of a self-destroyer, which hints at the supernatural because the idea of suicide goes against the Bible's teaching, so i.e. the sort of the natural course in life. And Stevenson was writing in a far more religious society than we live in today. His readers of the time would have been Christian, would have been church-going, and that would have been very supernatural to them, the fact that this character appears to have taken his own life. So this is the shocking discovery that the pair make. They stumble into the laboratory, or sort of bash their way into the laboratory, where they find Hyde dead on the floor, wearing Jekyll's clothes, the crushed phial, and the strong smell of kernels, and their assumption is that Hyde has committed suicide. So let's go on now, and we'll have a little look at the next section. We're left on this section with Utterson's sort of concern again for his friend, where he says, it only remains for us to find the body of your master. So that's the question that remains for them. Where is Jekyll? Okay, so after searching the apartment, no sign can be found of Jekyll's whereabouts, but Utterson and Poole do find a letter addressed to Utterson. And the question we've got to think about with this section of the extract is, why do you think Utterson chooses to wait before calling the police and opening the letter? What does he fear? So again, we'll have a little look at it in detail first. So it says, he caught up the next paper. It was a brief note in the doctor's hand and dated at the top. "Oh, Poole," the lawyer cried. "He was alive and here this day. He cannot have been disposed of in so short a space. He must be still alive. He must have fled. And then why fled, and how? And in that case, can we venture to declare this suicide? Oh, we must be careful. I foresee that we may yet involve your master in some dire catastrophe." "Why don't you read it, sir?" asked Poole. "Because I fear," replied the lawyer solemnly. "God grant I have no cause for it." And with that, he brought the paper to his eyes and read as follows. So a couple of bits just to point out in terms of what's going on here on this slide. In the yellow, he was alive and here this day. So we know that from the date on the top of the letter that Jekyll was still certainly alive that morning, which does sort of fill Utterson and Poole with a sense of hope that perhaps he can't have gone that far, or perhaps he might still be alive if he was still so that morning. And the sort of mixture of hope, of panic, of kind of desperation that we get from Utterson comes across in the purple there with all of the questions that he sort of suddenly flings out at Poole. He says, he must be still alive, he must have fled, and then why fled and how? And in that case, can we venture to declare this suicide? And I guess the way that we've got all of those questions back to back means that the readers share these feelings with Utterson, this kind of wanting to know actually what has happened to Jekyll, whether he is still around, whether he has just gone missing, whether he is dead. But the little rhetorical questions show this desperation, this panic, this sort of need to know the answer. And at the same time, the blue with dire catastrophe shows that Utterson knows they've got to be really careful with what they do next. He has realised that Jekyll is caught up in something really awful, but he doesn't want to make it worse. Jekyll is still his friend, and he doesn't want to sort of get him in masses of trouble. He wants to know the answers before he sort of takes the next steps or finds anything else about it. It's also interesting because he says, and I've highlighted it in the green there, that he fears reading the letter, which again throws that into question, because we think, well, why does he fear it? Does he fear the truth? Does he fear gaining more knowledge? So is it a sort of reluctance? He doesn't really want to know what's going on, but he sort of needs to know. Does he fear what's going to happen to himself and to Poole if they find out more? Are they sort of implicating themselves in whatever's going on? So he's hesitating. He is not sure about opening this letter at all. Excuse me. So the extract ends with this. Utterson opens the letter and this is what it says. "My dear Utterson, when this shall fall into your hands, I shall have disappeared. Under what circumstances, I have not the penetration to foresee. But my instinct and all the circumstances of my nameless situation tell me that the end is sure and must be early. Go then, and first read the narrative which Lanyon warned me he was to place in your hands. And if you care to hear more, turn to the confession of your unworthy and unhappy friend, Henry Jekyll." "There was a third enclosure?" asked Utterson. "Here, sir," said Poole, and gave into his hands a considerable packet sealed in several places. The lawyer put it in his pocket. "I would say nothing of this paper. If your master has fled or is dead, we may at least save his credit. It is now 10. I must go home and read these documents in quiet, but I shall be back before midnight, where we shall send for the police." Okay, so they find this envelope, which is labelled with Utterson's name, and we know that it was dated that morning. But the envelope itself contains further envelopes, so it's sort of letters within a letter and some instructions of what to do with it. And it's interesting because envelopes come up quite a bit in the novel, and they become quite important throughout the novella. Envelopes, I guess, are sort you can kind of see as being containers of secrets, and for that reason, they're an important symbol in Jekyll and Hyde. Why? Well, firstly, to envelop something is French. It translates to mean to wrap around, and for that reason, it can have many layers of meaning. So to be enveloped by something or someone can be emotional, or it could be physical. We can be enveloped in fog, sort of alienated from our surroundings, from everything that we know, or we can be enveloped in the arms of someone we love, helping us to feel safe and secure and loved. And an envelope itself can contain all sorts of contents, can't it? If you just think about the post that comes through your door, there's bills, there might be letters from friends, there might be tickets that you've booked to go to different places. So all sorts of contents, unwanted bills, it could be threatening letters, it might be postcards, it could be love letters, or explosive packages filled with death and hate. The documents within this envelope are going to reveal all of Jekyll's secrets, and from them unfolds the full story to Utterson. So this is a really pivotal point, the kind of opening of these envelopes, because with it comes the knowledge and the answers to all the questions that these two men have had. So in this novella, the envelopes lead Utterson and the reader through the many circles of Jekyll's hell, I guess. And as such, the envelopes become a metaphor for the multi-layered narrative and the way that that holds all of the monstrous secrets within it. So for Utterson, on a first opening of this, it's a letter from his friend Henry Jekyll, and it contains instructions. So he says, first of all, when this shall fall into your hands, the fact that he's got it tells me that the end is sure. So Jekyll is pretty sure that if Utterson has gone into the laboratory and has found the letter, he himself is going to be dead. And so he therefore says to his friend, inside this envelope are two other things. So first, read the narrative which Lanyon warned me he was to place in your hands. So that's the first thing that he's asking Utterson to go away and do. And then he says, and if you care to hear more, turn to the confession of your unworthy and unhappy friend. So these are the bits that are inside. There's the letter, this sort of covering letter, if you like, from Henry Jekyll. Then there's the narrative from Lanyon. And then there is the confession of Jekyll himself. And it's interesting that he calls it his confession, because that suggests that he has done something bad or something sinful, because you confess your sins. If it was something cheerier, he might have chosen a different word there. So it's interesting because Utterson wants to know exactly what has happened, and he wants to form sort of his own plan. He wants to have all the knowledge before he does anything about it. So he very clearly says to Poole what he's going to do. He's going to take this away, he's going to read all the documents, then he's going to come back, and then he'll send for the police, which shows that he is sort of considering informing the police, but he wants the knowledge and he wants his own plan first. And that perhaps is a question of trust. Maybe it's a question of their friendship as well. But this is his plan at the end of the extract. So there you have it. This is extract 19. So you now have got the two questions to form your answers to. So firstly, what terrible discoveries do Utterson and Poole make when they break down the door, and the way that sort of language works to describe those discoveries? And then secondly, why do you think Utterson chooses to wait before calling the police and opening the letter? What does he fear? And that answer could be both on the bits that we just pulled out a little bit in the text there, but it could also be from what you know of Utterson and Jekyll's relationship and Utterson's sort of thoughts so far in the novel. So what has happened in the build up to this moment that also might mean that Utterson wants to wait before calling the police and informing them of what's happened. So there we go. I hope this has helped you a little bit to answer those two questions. And you can either write them straight onto the documents, because I know you can you've downloaded your own version that you're saving. And I know a few of you have printed them out as well, you can highlight and write them around it as well, whichever way you find easiest. Just make sure you're keeping everything safe so that you've got it all for when we do eventually get back to school. There we go. Take care, Year 10. Hopefully see you all really soon. Stay safe. Bye.